Hello, hello, hello. I'm just getting, hello, hello, everybody. I'm just getting Instagram set up here, but give me 1 second. Sorry about the delay. Hang in there. It'll be worth it. Okay, well, maybe I need to turn my camera on. There we go. Okay, hi. Thanks for bearing with me. So, welcome. If you are about to run a marathon, amazing. If you are thinking about running a marathon, amazing. If you've run marathons in the past and you just like learning, amazing. And if you just like learning in general, awesome. So, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about fueling, nutrition, and hydration on marathon day. Yesterday, I did a live where I talked about carb loading, hydrating as we lead up to the marathon the week of, but today's going to be race day specific. So a lot of people right now, since we are in the fall, are in the middle of their taper, and I'm sure you are second guessing everything that you thought you knew or thought you had learned about nutrition, fueling, and whatever, because you've got too much time on your hands. So first and foremost, if you think this is just going to overwhelm you, click out right now. I just don't even watch. If you already know what you need to know, you don't need to know more. I don't want to overwhelm you. Like, goodbye, you're good. But if you're like me, I just feel like the more I know, the better off I am. And hopefully today, I won't keep you too long, we'll cover kind of the most commonly asked questions I get about how to fuel the morning of, how to fuel during the race, and how to hydrate, how we get enough electrolytes in, and all the things. Something else I want you to remember, if you're watching this and you're like literally a week out from your race, 2 weeks out, you have practiced this all season, right? All those long training runs, you've been fueling, you've been hydrating, and if you don't know by now what fuel you like, how you get your water, how you're going to hold your water, what water bottle you're using, this might not be that helpful. This is going to be most helpful for people that already know what kind of nutrition they use during the race and what electrolyte supplement works best for them. I'm going to explain how much and when, but again, that's what like the last 16, 18 weeks were for you to figure that out. Now, if you are just thinking about running a marathon, you're going to realize as you train, you're going to be figuring out what type of nutrition works best for you during those longer runs. Okay, so let's get to the nitty gritty. I do have a document that I created, and I'm more than happy to share it with everybody. So just DM me if you want it. It's a cheat sheet about carb loading the week of. It's a cheat sheet about fueling day of, fueling in the marathon, and all the things. So just DM me and I will send it to you. And if you missed my carb loading talk yesterday, that is on my Facebook and Instagram feed, and I will probably put all this on YouTube as well. Okay, so fueling for your race obviously is going to start in the week leading up to the race, right? And I always suggest cutting off food like 12 to 14 hours before you wake up for your race, so you can digest that food, poop, and then start fueling in the morning. So we're going to start with like, what do I do when I wake up? How do I fuel the morning of? So if you are someone who throughout your training season had breakfast before your long runs, stick to that, okay? I typically don't eat breakfast the morning of a long run. I eat a lot the night before. That's just what works best for me. But if you have been eating a meal all summer long in the morning before your race, stick to that. And if you haven't, I highly suggest not starting that the day of the race. We don't want to change things all of a sudden just because we're like hearing that other people are doing it. Stick to what's worked for you. So since a lot of these races do start significantly later, probably than your morning runs have been. Like I usually ran long runs at 6. My race is not going to start till 8 or 8:30. I'm not going to have a breakfast, but I am going to start fueling with my race nutrition. So like for people that use gels, chews, blocks or liquid carbohydrate source, I would suggest having that at least about 15 minutes before you go over that start line. So if you're not having a breakfast, but you've been up for, a few hours, you want to get something in you before you start running. So for me, I'll take a few honey stinger blocks because that's the nutrition that's worked best for me. If you use gels, or if you're someone that uses like a powder like Tailwind, then do that. You want to get something in you before you begin running. If you are a breakfast eater, somewhere between 300 to 500 calories should be really good. We want that to be high carb, like 50 to 75 grams of carb, low fiber, low fat, and again, stick to what you know. I will probably also have like some pretzels, maybe some Swedish fish. I know that will sit fine with me, but I'm not going to have a full-on breakfast because I didn't have a full-on breakfast for the last 18 weeks of my long runs. So like I said, maybe a breakfast, 300 to 500 calories. That should be about 1 to 3 hours before you start. If you aren't having that, again, get some carbs in you about 15 minutes before you cross that start line. About 25 grams of carbs should do the trick. Again, could be gels, blocks, liquid, it doesn't matter. Now water, a lot of people are like, should I drink water before? Again, you've been doing this for like 18 weeks. So if you typically drink X amount of water before your run, stick to that. If you have not kept track of how much water you're drinking on the morning of your runs, I would suggest somewhere between 18 to 30 ounces. And the reason it's kind of a big range is we need to balance getting some water in you, but also you don't want to have a ton of water sloshing around as you start, right? And you want to kind of limit the amount of bathroom breaks probably. So rule of thumb is going to be around 18 to 30 ounces. It also depends on how hot it is, how much you sweat, but don't go into the race without any water in you. Leading up to the race, you want to make sure you are really, really well hydrated. Your hydration on race day shouldn't start that morning. It should have started in the days prior. So, you can do like the old-fashioned pee test. Is your pee like a pale yellow in the days leading up to the race, indicating that you're hydrated? Because I'm not going to be able to give you like an exact amount of ounces that you need to be well hydrated. Electrolytes, I highly suggest having at least one electrolyte supplement in the days leading up to your race. Again, something that you should have been doing all season. I like Noon tablets. That's worked well for me, but there are certainly other good brands out there. If you like, stick to what you know. If you like Noon, if you like LMNT, if you like Liquid IV, you don't want to be playing catch up on race day. You want to already have kind of front-loaded electrolytes. And a lot of people ask, well, can I like overdo it with water? And the answer is, when you hear about like hyponatremia, when people like basically drown themselves, that comes from drinking too much water and not actually absorbing that water. And that comes from not having enough electrolytes. So we want to kind of front load our electrolytes. I would have at least one electrolyte supplement in the days leading up. And then for me, I always have an electrolyte either in my water that I have right before I run or in my first water bottle. I run with a handheld. So again, hopefully you know already what works for you. If you don't, so probably should have figured that out earlier, but don't skimp on electrolytes, because otherwise a lot of that water you're ingesting could like literally be in vain if you're not absorbing it. Okay, so we've talked now about kind of the morning of what are we eating, what are we drinking, what are we electrolyting with, and then of course comes the question of what and how much do I fuel during my run. So again, if you are at the end of your training season, you should already know, do you do best with gels? Do you do best with blocks? Do you do best with a liquid form carb? If you don't know, if you're just starting your training, you're going to figure that out as the season goes on. So how much should you bring? How much should you be taking in? Again, this is something hopefully you practiced along the way. But what you need to know is you're going to need to do it on a much bigger scale now, right? So when we hear about people hitting the wall, bonking, that is 9 times out of 10 due to underfueling as opposed to not being physically capable. So we want to really prevent that. So we talked about having some fuel either at breakfast and or about 15 minutes before you start. And then I would suggest taking in your first nutrition, your first carb, your first block, gel, whatever, within the first 25 to 45 minutes. Again, you know your body best, but don't go longer than that, because what's going to happen is you want to front load your carbs again, because you're going to be burning calories, and you're not going to be able to keep up with replenishing all of them, right? So we want to front load it. We want to get ahead. We want to stay ahead of the game. And the later you are in the race, the more stress your GI system is going to be under, and the less you're going to desire to actually eat anything at all. So we want to do ourselves a favor. Your future self is going to thank you if you take care of it earlier on. So I would say first 25 to 45 minutes, start fueling. And you're going to say, well, how much fuel do I take in? So here we go. So yesterday I talked about the rule of thumb going into the week with carb loading. The week leading up, the couple days leading up, the rule of thumb is like 2.5 to 4.5 grams of carb per body weight for those 2 to 4 days going into the race. During the race, and you should probably already know this by now because you've been running so much, but the rule of thumb is we want to be taking in about 60 to 90 grams of carbs per hour. Okay, and this is going to depend a lot on your specific GI system. It's going to just depend on who you are, how you're made up. So that's why the range is big, 60 to 90. But all the research is saying like that's the optimal range. So again, we want to kind of balance being fueled but not causing GI distress. So the key term here is 60 to 90 grams per hour. It's a lot. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and I'm sorry, I cannot remember which one. I listened to so many, but someone on one of them said it should feel like fueling, like eating and drinking carbs during the race is your job. That's how kind of frequent it should be. So for reference, like a gel pack is usually about 25 to 30 grams of carbs. A honey stinger, like the long packages of blocks, are about 37 grams of carbs. So that's not even enough for 1 hour. So as you plan for race day, you want to figure out how much of my nutrition should I bring. And of course, any powder or liquid form carbs, those count as well. So how the heck are we going to get 60 to 90 grams per hour without feeling sick to our stomachs? The key one is hopefully you have been training your GI, your gut, during the season, hopefully. If not, may the force be with you. I'm just joking. But in general, you want to take it in a little bit at a time. So I wouldn't suggest pounding like 60 grams and like being like, okay, I'm done fueling for the hour. But taking in a little bit, like maybe every 20 minutes, every 15 minutes, to allow your body to sort of like get it down the hatch, take in some water, digest, and then take in a little bit more. So I would suggest, again, doing the math ahead of time and being like, okay, this is like 1.5 gel packs per hour. So I need 6 gels or whatever it is that you're going to bring. If you like to do this with liquid, you can alternate between liquids and solids, whatever works best for you. A little hack somebody recommended is to bring extras. A lot of times you might drop them, give them to, if you have friends or family coming to watch your race, give them extras. There should be some available on the course, but of course it might not be the type of nutrition that you're used to. So bring extras. Something I'm going to do is, because I use the honey stinger packs, I have a really hard time ripping them open when my hands are sweaty. So I'm going to cut them open before and just put them in my pockets. Same with the gels. You might want to find a way that you can open them, maybe put them in a Ziploc so that they don't get all over your pants. But it's hard to open them with sweaty fingers. Okay, so that might have done it. We've talked about the kind of rule of thumb, 60 to 90, to take it in, a little bit at a time. We talked about electrolytes going in. So, okay, how much electrolytes should we be taking in during the run? And that's one of these very much it depends question. It depends how hot it is, how humid it is, depends how sweaty or how salty of a sweater you are. because when we lose our electrolytes, like that's our sweat. What are we losing through our sweat? Sodium, magnesium, potassium. So for me, I'm a really salty sweater. So I'm going to make sure I have a ton of like sodium and electrolytes leading up to the race. And I personally will probably take a noon tablet like the first hour and then have one in my pocket for later on. I have found if I take too much in, I get a stomach ache. So again, depends on you, depends on the weather, depends on how salty of a sweater you are, how sweaty of a sweater you are, and all those things. What you want to look for is about 1,000 to 1,500 milligrams of sodium in an electrolyte supplement. I've been asked a lot if coconut water is a good electrolyte supplement, and it's really not. It does not have a lot of sodium in it. Doesn't mean you can't drink it, but I would not rely on that for your electrolyte supplement. If you don't want to put your supplement in like water and you don't want to mix it with your water, that's fine too. You can get those salt stick tabs. Those do have sodium, magnesium, and potassium in it as well. So those are kind of the key things you want to look for in electrolyte supplements. I know the Chicago Marathon is handing out Gatorade Endurance, so that is also an electrolyte supplement and has carbs. That works well for my stomach, but if you haven't been drinking whatever they're handing out on the course and you don't know a week out if that's going to sit okay with your stomach, I would suggest probably not taking it unless you have no other choice. So other ways too that you can get extra electrolytes in leading up to race week: adding extra salt to your food, perfectly fine. Just eating saltier foods in general. And then other foods that have electrolytes in them, kind of the ones that, again, if you're like sick of noon tablets, you're sick of liquid IV, getting bananas, sweet potatoes, avocado, watermelons, cantaloupe, I already mentioned coconut water, pickles, oranges are all good sources of electrolytes. So like just to continue to heighten the amount that you're taking in, can't hurt, right? And I almost forgot this. How much water should you be taking in? Again, very, very much depends on you as a runner, how sweaty you are, what the conditions are, what's worked for you. But general rule of thumb is about 6 to 7 ounces of water every 15 minutes or so. For reference, the little cups they hand out on the course usually have about 3 to 5 ounces. So this is hopefully something that you've practiced, but if you want like rules of thumb to keep in mind, know that. And a lot of people think the majority of GI issues during a race come from food or food not sitting well, but in fact a ton of GI issues come from people being dehydrated. They just don't realize that, and they just associate it with the food. So we really want to stay ahead of hydration. And again, that water it's not meaningless, but it's not as helpful if we're not absorbing it through electrolytes. And if we're pouring out our electrolytes through sweat and not able to hold on to that water, you're going to end up dehydrated and having a really, really hard time. So I believe I covered everything I had planned on covering. Please DM me, comment below if you have questions, comments, and if you want my cheat sheet that goes over race day fueling, nutrition, hydration, and what I talked about yesterday, which is carb loading the week of your race, let me know. I'm going to send it out to whoever wants it. It takes a lot of information and boils it down, so hopefully it doesn't feel that overwhelming. And again, this is not meant to overwhelm you. If you already know what you're going to do, you already have a plan, great. I just believe knowledge is power. But if this all felt overwhelming, then just forget it and stick to what you already know. Happy running, happy fall.